Hello, hello! And I hope to do this in one take, but I probably won't, because I have food in the oven, because I mismanaged my time slightly, by like 3 minutes. So now it's going to be out before I'm finished with this, probably. Ugh. Okay. This particular episode of my weird Plaguetober thing that I do sometimes, but not usually, is the Dobhar-chu. It's always fun trying to say these weird-ass names. It's helpful whenever the cryptid is just English, and it's just like, it's the diarrhea pine woods monster of Lesser California, or whatever it is. I shouldn't have to tell you that's not a real thing. It could be, though. There's lots of weird, fucked up, like, lesser cryptids in America. It's kind of weird. Like, most of the world has monsters. We have cryptids. Like, even America's version of monster is just like, it's something that doesn't exist. Like, we freely admit it's like a boring monster. Then again, most monsters are boring. Okay, so case in point. This is the Dobhar-chu, I guess, maybe. I'm guessing with that. I also always look forward to the comments and the videos that are like, I really love listening to him trying to pronounce incorrectly our language. It is hilarious. Well, it is. Please enjoy. Okay, so Dobhar-chu. You would think I would know a little bit more. My family is Irish, historically anyways. We were apparently a bunch of boat captains that sailed cargo for generations and generations. I think up until like John the 13th, they all did the same thing and all had the same name. And then we were one of the first people over in the Jamestown settlement, and that's how we got over to America, from my understanding. Which could be completely wrong, because American genealogy is really fucked up because of the Civil War. So anytime that you get to the Civil War and you're tracing back your ancestors, you'll find, oh, there's like no information. Yep. Things got kind of fucked up at that point. Okay, so the basic concept with this particular monster is that it is just a gigantic otter. So my idea with that was basically just, I want to do a giant otter and have it do that cute thing where it is playing like with a rock or a clamshell or something while it's on its back. Like the very moment that I thought of giant otter, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I could have done any number of things, but yeah. So to that end, I was like, well, if I'm going to be drawing it cupping a stone and it has to be a hot monster girl, then obviously I'm going to give it a big pair of rockin' knockers, right? Yeah, big meaty clackers. Very insistent on that. So all these primaries are just me trying to figure out a way of doing that while also showing that it has an otter body, while trying to conceal nipplage and crotches. What's the word? Nipplage and crotchicity. There we go. There we go. And I eventually figured out how to do that, sort of. But you'll see. I actually do really like that side profile one, because it really shows off the big knockerage. But, you know, can't have everything. Can't have everything. So, you might be asking yourself, probably not, what is Dobhar-chu? What is Dobhar-chu? I don't know what accent that is. You might be asking that. It's not much. It kind of depends. The general idea is that usually it is just a giant otter, which is kind of boring. Sometimes it is said to be black, like because everything that's evil has to be like very dark and mysterious, so everything has to be like pitch black, like black as the night. Other times, in rare cases, I have seen it in my little research. It depicted as having a horn on the top of its head. But that is very rare. And in lesser cases, I have also seen it depicted as having scales like a fish. Although, again, that is not that frequent. And whenever I was doing this, I actually did have the intention of making it like half fish in some way. Because I had gotten really tired of drawing fur. The very tired of drawing fur. Yes. I got pretty tired of having to draw fur. It was getting on my nerves. So I thought, well, it'd be nice to draw something with scales. But then, as I was drawing it, I realized this thing's going to have both. I'm going to have to draw it not only having, like, fur, but also weirdly combining it with the texture of fish scales. And I knew that drawing the texture of fish scales was going to drive me absolutely insane. So at some point, I was like, forget it, and just, it's a giant otter. Like, most of the things say that it's a giant otter, so I'm just going to roll with that. But anyways, that's what I'm doing here. And if you're wondering how come it just looks like a big otter, because most of the time it's just a big otter, sadly. Most monsters, as I've said in the prior videos, this particular 2022 season, are quite boring. Because it just comes down to, it's a big wolf, it's a big bat, it's a big otter. Because most of the time, that's exactly what they were based off of. One time someone saw an animal, they weren't used to seeing it. It was bigger than they expected because people are like that. We just, for some reason, expect everything to be the size of a house cat. And it freaked them out, and then it became a monster. Because people are stupid. So, in this particular case, with this particular hot G-cup otter, what size are those? Those are way too big. Like, honestly, those are way too big. But that's okay. And, by the way, I'll skip ahead. If at some point in this video you're wondering, is that otter touching herself? No. No, I was just trying to conceal that particular area of the otter body. But also, if you wish for it to be, then it may be. That is up to you. I was just trying to make sure that her hand was floating around the crotchal area. Just to ensure that you couldn't fap. But you probably will. Anyways, the Dobhar-chu itself, I should say it with just the most robust American accent possible. Dobhar-chu. Sorry, I enjoy that. There's something really funny about taking the flourishes and intricacies of another language and just not caring at all. Like, if you're learning to speak some, I don't know, like if you're trying to speak Japanese or something, and instead of, like, badly pronouncing konnichiwa, you're like, konnichiwa. Just not giving a shit at all. Bonjour. Just trying to be as offensive as possible. I'm sure that people would enjoy it for about 5 minutes. Then it would wear thin very quickly. Okay, anyway, sorry. Dobhar-chu is as Wikipedia says, it's a creature of Irish folklore. Sometimes people also say that it resembles like a dog combined with an otter, but if you look at an otter, they look like dogs anyways. So like, oh, it's like a combination. Like, in what way? Like, its nose is very slightly longer. Its ears are a little bit floppy, maybe? I don't know. I just ignored that part because it sounded fucking stupid to me. Anyways, the Wikipedia page will only get you so far when it comes to this information. It does have like one or two things. Dobhar-chu itself is apparently a word that is used for otter, although it didn't give any context for that, and I couldn't really find any. And it does go briefly into the thing that I'll go into here in a second. But, yeah, if you're just relying on... It's one of those things, if you just rely on the Wikipedia page, you're really not going to get much of anywhere. Like I said, usually whenever I have to research these things, I have to go through Google Books. And sometimes even find things that are in a language that I do not speak, and then try to hard translate specific, chapters and things that I actually find, and just hope that it works out. And usually it does not. But I do manage to find one or two things in that respect. Okay, so. Usually, Stories about this thing come from Western Ireland. Ireland. Western Ireland. And there are specifically 2 lakes that are usually referenced in regards to this thing. And that is, I think, Lake Mask and Lake Corrib, I think. Actually, those might be the native. They might have, like, anglicized versions of those names. I'm not really sure. Because I think even... Yeah. In even, like, the maps, I think it's referred to as Loch Corrib, or however you pronounce that. Loch Corrib. Instead of, like... But anyway, you get the idea. Over there. They're over there. So there's sort of an association with both the ocean and also just, freshwater. So it could be anything. I've seen some people erroneously state that it is a traveling monster and it shows up in Lake Erie sometimes, which I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, dude. Whatever, conspiracy man. You just do you. Have fun. Sure. So sometimes it just travels the world and goes through a bunch of landlocked, like, tributary systems just to get to Lake Erie to make Dave the conspiracy nut happy. Sure, that happens sometimes. Why not? Fucking care. But anyways, it's usually associated with Western Ireland. And I think that the reason why sometimes it's said that it has a horn on the top of its head, you'll see why in a bit. I will use a report on irishcentral.com as sort of our primary reference point. They have a pretty good write-up on it. Of course, with all these mythology things, it's not like you can be right or wrong necessarily. But it does give a good sort of founding stone. What's the word? What's the fucking word I'm looking for? It gives a good big handful to reach inside the Jurassic Park poopy pile to be able to pull forth all of the rich scientific goodness that you might find within, or not, because let's face it, it's all bullshit anyways. That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. No, it wasn't, but yeah, good enough. Okay. It's supposedly the name is not just otter, it means water hound, which I guess is the reason why it is sometimes depicted as being part dog, just because it has the word hound in its name. That's my guess. It could mean anything. Supposedly, reports of this thing go back... Oh yeah, it does list it. As far as 1684. But it is primarily known for one specific story, and let's see if I can get that out of the way real fast. Yes, even though it goes back that far, in 1722, this is the main story that people always reference. A woman that... She usually has 2 names. One... And I'm going to mispronounce the fuck out of this. But I think her name was like Gren Connolly, which is fine. Connolly is like a... You hear that sometimes. That was supposedly her maiden name, and then she's also referred to as... This is where it's going to get real fucked up. Grace McLaughlin, or something. McLoylin. McLoylin? I'll just say McLoylin. It has like... It's like Mick and then Gloighlin. So it's just... Whatever. Someone tripped and fell and lost all their vowels, and then they quickly picked them back up, and that's the name that they got. Supposedly the reason why is back then it was more common for women to keep their maiden names and not take on the last names of their husbands. So this is the reason why there's a disparity between her having 2 names. She lived in Crevelia, I think. And, let's see, close to the border of Leitrim and Sligo, whatever the hell, and on the northwestern part of Glenade Lake. Ireland, what are you doing up there? Like, I know you people drink all the time, but come on. Anyways. Supposedly she went down to the lake to bathe. And the story basically just goes that her husband walked up, found her dead, and this thing, the sexy G-cup breasted otter, not really, was like leaning over her body and she was dead. So he took out a dagger and just walked up and killed it while I was sleeping. And I guess it didn't take correctly, because the story goes is that it had a death wail as it was dying. So I guess he didn't go for the neck, which he probably should have. Don't ask me how he managed to kill. Like, did he drive it through its brain? If he got it through the neck, then it wouldn't have been able to howl in the first place. So maybe he tried to get it through the chest. Why would he do? Anyway, point being is I'm pretty sure the story's. Don't tell anyone. I think the story might be fucking bullshit. The story might actually not be true. So he kills this thing. It lets out a death wail, and that attracts its mate. So its partner crawls up, and it's fucking pissed. So the guy realizes, oh, I can't dagger two otters, and he gets on his horse and then rides away. But this is like a very determined otter. And for some reason, the guy is fully aware that this thing is going to chase him to the ends of the earth. I guess. Like, he just knows it. Like, it really makes no sense the more you think about it, but, you know, it's one of these stories. So, he rides to, I think it's a blacksmith. It changes. Sometimes he's riding alongside his brother, who may or may not have been there at the same time. Why his brother would be there, I don't know. But sometimes it's said that it's his brother. Sometimes it's just a guy that he knew. But either way, he rides over, finds the guy, and this guy just so happens to know everything about this monster. Like, just so happens. It's very coincidental. And this guy says, okay, this thing is going to chase you forever because it's a monster. So what you got to do is you got to get behind your horse. And then whenever this thing finds you, the first thing it's going to do is jump and like try to plow its whole body through your horse's side. And I'm sure at this point, you know, the horse was like perked up its eyebrows, like, excuse me? So that's exactly what they do. They set up their horses as like a barricade, or this is why I said this story is fucking stupid. It's not even the more you think about it. It just sounds stupid the first time you read it. But anyways, they set up their horses, and of course this thing flies through one of the horse's sides and gets its head stuck, you know, tag stuck in the wall. And earlier, I think the blacksmith had given him a specific sword, and like, this sword's good for killing mythical beasts, and then they behead the monster, and that's how they kill it. And also the horse shook it off, I guess. No, the horse died. And in some versions of the story, of course, it's his brother, and he doesn't go there. They just are both somehow being chased. It's almost like a dream. You know how in dreams things just change and there's no real reason? Sometimes there's a narrative reason in the dream for why something happens. It's like that. Like, he finds his wife, he kills this other thing, they ride off together, and then his brother is just there. And there's no explanation for why his brother is there. He just is. His brother's there. Don't worry about it. So in some versions of the story, that's what happens. And they don't actually go to a place, they just realize that they will not be able to outrun this thing indefinitely, which also makes no sense because it's like an aquatic animal, they're on horses. Is it going to know where they live? Sorry, I'm like cupping my hands because this story is so goddamn dumb. So they have to stop. They have to stop eventually, and then they kill the thing that way. In some version of the story also, the otter does not impossibly launch itself like a missile through a horse's body halfway so that they can behead it. Instead, they, like, stand behind their horses so that the otter has to go through the horse's legs to get at them. And that's whenever they attack it. I have no clue why exactly it's so important that the horse be there. It seems like they could have just done that with, like, a fence or just some weeds or almost anything that does not involve the horse almost getting killed. But whatever, yeah, whatever. The story is stupid. The story is so fucking stupid. Like, the more that I read about this, the more that I started... Like, in the last part that I did, the last drawing that I did, I was talking about how the firefox... I was researching how, apparently, as you move north and the air actually gets drier, but also still cold, then it's not uncommon for things like foxes to, when they're moving through the woods, to send up sparks off their body because of static electricity. And I sort of pieced everything together and then realized, oh, this must have been like a common story of hunters discovering foxes during hunts because it was a hunter-gatherer society, and they were mystified by the fact that it was actually like putting off flames in a way, and it became just, you know, like mythology over time. People reporting these stories back and not really understanding what was going on. Or maybe they sort of did, but, you know, it still seemed very magical to them. You know, and just everything sort of worked out, and suddenly I understood what the story was. This story, I don't fucking know. Because it's so goddamn weird. Like, the first thing that I thought was, it's probably just a seal. Like, someone... I don't know, just someone saw a seal and they were like, whoa, a seal, that's weird. Or they didn't really recognize it at first, or it was bigger than they thought it would be, or maybe it was something that was reminiscent of a seal and they didn't recognize it, like it was a, I don't know, a walrus or something. You know, who knows? I don't know what's in that region. Just, it was probably something that they didn't recognize, and then they made up a moronic story to try to explain it. That was my best guess. But then I thought, this story is so goddamn specific. And the thing is, you can even find the tombstone of this lady. Like, this lady did actually exist. You can find her tombstone, and it's been weathered to the point where you can't actually read what's on it anymore. But there is, like, a nearby, whatever you want to call it, etching, or, you know, whatever, memorial, that depicts a guy stabbing one of these things with a dagger. Which tells me that whenever she was buried, this was the working story that they were working with. Or at least... Or it could be that someone, you know, retroactively said, oh, this is her grave. And then after the story had become popularized, then a few years afterwards, or like a decade or two afterwards, you know, long since they could prove or, you know, understand anything, they put this thing alongside it, and that's the reason why that the weathering is so similar. It seems to be the same age, because it was fairly recent. It's, you know how, like, it's like how most of the biblical books are things that were written not within Jesus' lifetime, but like, you know, like a couple decades afterwards at best. And the versions that we actually have of it are, again, at best, like copied, rewritten versions of those things that we're getting like centuries sometimes later. So we don't actually have, you know, the word from the horse's mouth, so to speak. But we still sort of look at it in the sense that it's historically accurate, or like the Trojan horse story. It has that same sort of deal, where it is something that historically probably happened, but it happened like in 11,000 BC or something, so who knows what the fuck it was. And we sort of think that there might have been a city in a specific place, but we don't know. And all the stories that we have about it are just misrepresented, like fantasies of what may have occurred. Anyways, this is like a very small baby version of that. So maybe something happened, and then 50 years afterwards they developed it into this weird story, and then people that were not there, have no idea what was going on, erected this thing alongside it, and that's how it propagated more as being historically accurate when it really wasn't. Who knows? Who knows? That part of it is interesting to me. I would be interested to see if there's a way for someone to check and see if that block for the etching is the same exact age as the block used for the tombstone. And if the age of the tombstone actually matches up with supposedly when this actually happened. But then again, we could just clap our hands and go, oh, G-cupped otter tits, fuck yeah, and just leave it at that. Which we will, because I'm not going to Ireland to do that. You can. I know what I'm talking about. The second thing that popped into my head... the second thing that popped into my head was... Maybe it's because I watched true crime stuff, but I was thinking, this guy probably killed his wife. This dude probably killed his wife, and there was another guy that was complicit in it. And they came up with this cockamamie story, because again, the stories about this thing existing have been around for, you know, what I said, the 1680s or so, or 1640s, I can't remember, 1680s, 1684. So maybe this dude didn't like his wife, was having an affair with some other, I'm just making this up, so I'm no better than they are, was having some affair with some pretty young thing, and he wanted to be free of his wife, so he killed her, and then made up this ridiculous story, and then got his brother, or the local blacksmith, or whoever it was, to fashion this ridiculous story about what had happened. And maybe even the horse thing could have been, I don't know, like he sold the horse or something. It was his, like her family had gifted him the horse or something, and he was selling it for money, or it could be some weird ass thing that would not make sense to us these days, but would make sense back then. I don't know. But point being is that dude fucking killed her. And then the otter was just him covering it up, man. Possibly. I don't know. Just that's the second thing that came to my mind. And by the way, here, I'm trying to shade in these cliffs. This is the point in the drawing where I was getting really frustrated. Because the line work... I'll briefly explain this. I was doing this drawing, and I was trying something different with the line work, which ended up being okay. I've been doing this new thing where I will draw the same thing twice, but one of them will have a wider brush to it. So it's like I'm going over a primary with a secondary primary that's like the first line layer, and then I will go back over that with a much thinner layer that is meant to replicate what the thinner portions of the line look like. And then I'll take that and I'll blur it out, so it kind of looks like it's one solid line work that has more breadth and depth to it, while still preserving the opacity, which is what I've been aiming for. If that makes no sense, don't worry about it. Just point being is I was trying something new, and it didn't quite work out, but it was still fine. So I was a little bit frustrated in that regard. So whenever I got to the coloring phase, I started getting even more frustrated because I was getting to the cliffs and realizing, oh shit, these cliffs are going to have so much texturing, and I'm drawing the fucking ocean, so I'm going to have to like draw water, which I don't want to do, because that's going to be a nightmare. Just anytime that you're not just drawing some lady standing there, and you start having to do backgrounds and stuff, it turns into a nightmare. Like it's way more work. Plus my Cintiq is naturally very dark, so anytime that I start doing color, I have to ratchet up the contrast and the color all the way to make sure that I'm working correctly. And that gave me a gigantic optic migraine. Like, I was in a lot of pain whenever I was doing this part. And so I found myself, like, trying to rush through it, and I realized I can't rush through it. And by this point, I had taken ibuprofen and gotten away from the computer for a while. I was still having the rush because this is Saturday that I'm recording it. I'm going to upload it today, but, you know, this was all yesterday, and I was trying to rush things. Like, I done the primary on Monday, then Tuesday, I just needed to take a break from things because too many other things were happening. I spent a lot of time on, like most of, even though this stuff is flying by, because it's moving at literally 2,000% speed. This took, I think, what was it? 15 hours? No, it wasn't that much this time. It was 11 and a half hours to do this one. It was the first drawing that took 15 hours. But they always take forever. And because I'm sort of on a schedule now, that makes me more anxious about it. Ooh, brain fart. So because I also am me, and I have whatever weird things that I have, whatever they are, I don't know. It kind of also makes me, like, lose my mind a little bit, and I kind of shut off for a while, which makes it a real struggle to do anything that's creative-based, because, you know, this is how creativity works. Different work does different things. If it's just, I've said this before, if it's, I need to make chairs for a living, you can just sit down and make the chair. You can put on your headphones and listen to a nice relaxing audiobook or a podcast or whatever, and sure, the work is hard, but it's very easy, and once you get into rhythm, you don't even notice that you're doing it. It's just that it eats away at your time for the rest of the day. So it's really not that complicated. Whereas creative work, it is exhausting because you have to constantly be active, and you have to be thinking all the time, and it has to be interesting, and it's just, you have to be on your A game constantly. And with this, there's no process of making the chair where you know the exact thing that you have to do. Every drawing is going to be different, so everything requires different solutions. So the process of just drawing something, it can be absolutely exhausting unless it's something that's very rigidly formatted. Like, you just draw, even though there are different characters, you're essentially doing the same drawing over and over and over again. A lot of artists do this. No knock against them, of course, but, you know. Even if you're doing something like making VTubing rigs, for example, which is a more common thing these days. That is also incredibly exhausting because there's so much work into it. But at the same time, you are just doing essentially the same sort of moves, motions, and solutions over and over and over again, which will drive you insane. But it's not as nightmarish for a while, as you might expect, if you get into the rhythm of it. But eventually you will absolutely lose your mind if you don't stop doing it. It is not like making a chair or working on a factory line or being a mechanic or working as a security guard or whatever. It's way more mental. You will lose your mind, and then you absolutely will kill your wife and blame it on an otter. That will happen. And if you're lucky, then your brother might be there to work things up with you. Oh, Lord. Anyways, yes, that's what I was doing. So that's the main story of them doing that. Supposedly there are other, like, stories, but I couldn't find any other than the more recent ones. Supposedly people even in the 2000s have been citing these things. Although you will note that what's a good way of putting this? In regards to, like, UFO sightings, for example, there's always this correlation between like, gray aliens is a great example of this. This is an even better example. once the concept of what a gray alien was became known in culture, then sightings of them skyrocketed. Which, of course, people that believe in such crazy things like to say, oh, look, this is when they started to visit us. But people that have any level of understanding just say, oh, this is whenever the idea began to propagate and people just started manufacturing them, like in their heads. And that's all it was. I've talked about, I'm going way off topic, but I've talked about it before, but look up sometime, if you don't know about them, hypnagogic hallucinations. Whenever you are going to sleep, the brain wants to shut off. Like, one of the things that the body does is it paralyzes itself, so you can't, roll around in your sleep. And it's one of the very first things that it does. And whenever you dream, you have to go into a specific state for that. And usually that doesn't happen until a few hours into sleep. But if you are especially, like if you're really exhausted, it is not uncommon for the body to try to start doing that right away. And it sort of just, for whatever its brain reasons, it mixes up the order of events that should be happening. And it makes it so that whenever you're going to sleep, one of the first things that happens is it will paralyze itself, but you'll still be conscious. And it will start trying to trigger dream state events, but it won't be doing it correctly, so you'll still be conscious while you're experiencing these things. And that's where a lot of paranormal experiences actually come from. Because what is actually happening is your brain is trying to dream while you're still awake. And because, this is the more interesting part of it to me, because we are our senses and pretty much nothing else, because you're still conscious and your brain is just using your sight and your hearing and all your senses to manufacture a dream state while you're still conscious, everything that you experience seems like it is absolutely real. There's no indication whatsoever that anything that you're experiencing is fake. Why did I start talking about this? I can't even remember, but I'll keep going. So that's where stories of ghosts and stuff come from. I've had one of them. Actually, I've had several, but the most intense was probably whenever I was trying to go to sleep. I was exhausted, and I started hearing whispering at the foot of my bed. And I tried to ignore it because I was aware that this was the thing, and I thought, I'm having one of those things. And as I ignored it, because it was like a dream, I got this sense that the voice didn't like being ignored. And so, whereas before it was just like, just whispering, just very light whispering, it started escalating, and the more that I ignored it, it just started roaring, it was just screaming at the top of its lungs at me. And of course, at that point, I was like, okay, and I managed to get up. Whatever the paralyzing thing was just went away, for whatever its reasons. And I just sat up and okay, I'll let it go away. Because I was fully aware that this was not, it was not like a specter haunting me or something. That's just what it is, as hypnagogic hallucination. So eventually I just, putted around for a bit and then went back to bed. Not like a big deal, but very uncomfortable. It does not make you feel good. So imagine if you're not someone that is aware of these things and you have an experience like that. It really freaks you out, and it makes no sense. So, people being abducted out of their beds by sectoids, the Greys, became way more pervasive after the concept of that happened, because if you become aware of something, then naturally it's going to be incorporated within your dreams. So me telling you this is going to make it real. Ooh. That's the reason why that things like that propagate, because as you become aware of things existing as a concept, then they will, start to skyrocket. So whenever it comes to something like this otter thing, then sure, I imagine utilizing that at the time would have made more sense for whatever its reasons. Maybe something actually did happen. Maybe this lady died of natural causes, although from, you would think that if this was a well-known story, then people would be fully aware that she was attacked in some fashion. And if this really was like someone trying to cover up a murder of their spouse or, whatever, some weird thing like that, then you would think that there would be, even though it's just like, the late 1600s, or the 1700s actually in this case, there would still be like an investigation, however rudimentary. Like they don't have fucking DNA testing or anything, but they would still, try to figure this shit out. So surely they would be aware that if this was a murder, then this would be nonsense. Maybe it was an actual animal attack. Supposedly. One of the weird little things that you'll see alongside this sometimes is that there actually are, or were, prehistoric gigantic otters. But I think they primarily lived in China, if I remember correctly. But they did exist. They were a thing. And here I'm adding a few droplets of water because I'm like, yes, I knew I was supposed to do this, but I really don't want to. So if it's like, she doesn't look wet enough. She doesn't look wet enough for daddy. If you're like that, then please unsubscribe. If you're like that, then just bear in mind, we're done with the drawing now, finally, thank God. I was losing my mind at this point. I just wanted it over with. And looking at the drawing now, I was working way too zoomed out at the time. I was working way too zoomed out, and I was trying to work way too fast. I'm going to have to go through and do some fixes on this now that I look at it, this resolution. Oh boy. Not every drawing can be a winner. I mean, it's fine, But you can tell that I was definitely trying to rush through things because I was losing my mind at the time. That's how it goes, Then you kill your wife and blame it on your brother. You blame it on the horse. That's how you do it. What if the story was about a killer horse instead? That's the thing, if this thing really plowed through his horse, did he show them also the horse that had a comical cartoon otter-shaped opening in its side? And the other horse that was the blacksmith's or his brother's was like, shit. Sorry. Anyways, they say to put your best work at the front and at the back and in the middle. I will probably be doing 4 of these videos this month. That's what I was trying to do. The reason why I was losing my mind is because I was trying to push and get this done quickly in order to try to get 5 this month. But I'm not going to be able to do it. The next one will be the last one. So this one is sort of in the middle, sort of not in the middle. Probably the weakest of the bunch, but that's fine. They can't all be winners. And as I said before, not to worry too much about everything needing to be perfect. Not everything needs to be this impeccable, beautiful, majestic thing all the time. Sometimes it's okay to just draw something as a concept and then that's it. A part of my art gripe thing is not showing you that I'm good at something. I'm not. I'm a sort of a journeyman when it comes to a lot of things. I'm good at a lot of stuff, but I'm not excellent at any of them. And drawing is one of those things. I'm just okay at it. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. And this part of the reason why I show you the videos on these things is not to look how good I am. I'm not. It's just to show, this is my process. This is what I'm doing. This is why I do it. This is the things that I have an interest in, and you can do it too. That's it. It's as simple as that. Like I said before, not everything is perfect. Nothing is perfect, so, make something. Anyways, be critical, be kind, especially to me. Be kind to me. I need it. I need it. Daddy needs it. Alright, see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Goodbye, Otter. G-Cup Otter.